The city skyline shimmered like a crown of glass and steel, reflecting the late afternoon sun in golden hues. Inside the conference room of Sterling Automotive, where polished marble floors whispered wealth and ambition, silence had settled into a fragile shell. Executives in immaculate suits, men and women who lived their lives in numbers and projections, were gathered around a long mahogany table. At its center, like a beast caged for exhibition, stood the company's most prized creation, a revolutionary engine meant to redefine performance and carry the Sterling legacy into the future. But instead of roaring with power, it sat lifeless, a hulk of metal and promise gone mute. The tension was thick, like air before a storm. At the head of the table stood Alexandra Sterling, the CEO, whose name carried equal weight with admiration and fear. She looked flawless in her tailored suit, her platinum hair falling in perfect waves, her eyes sharp as winter frost. She was the embodiment of control, the woman who could freeze an entire boardroom with a glance, the heiress who had transformed herself into a sovereign queen of industry. Yet, in that moment, the corners of her mouth trembled with impatience. The demonstration had failed. Her grand unveiling, the moment meant to silence whispers of nepotism and doubt, had collapsed in humiliating stillness. "Fix it," she demanded, her voice slicing through the room. Her engineers, all degrees and brilliance, scrambled with panic. Fingers danced over diagnostic screens, words of calibration errors and software glitches tumbled out like prayers to absent gods. Nothing answered. The machine remained still, mocking her authority. Alexandra's jaw tightened, and in a desperate attempt to conceal the crack in her perfect facade, she turned her frustration into cruelty. Her eyes swept the room until they landed on the man who had been summoned from the maintenance floor, a man whose oil-stained coveralls were out of place among the $1,000 suits. William Carter stood in the doorway, tool bag in hand, his presence a quiet interruption in a room of power and ego. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and his uniform carried the scent of labor and honest sweat. His hands were calloused, his face marked with the quiet dignity of a man who had lived through more than workdays and deadlines. His grey eyes, steady and calm, held something that unnerved Alexandra, an absence of fear. She smirked, and the executives followed suit, their laughter thin and cruel. "Really? We're calling the janitor to fix what the brightest minds couldn't." The laughter stung the air like broken glass. "He's not a janitor, ma'am," one engineer whispered, ashamed. "He's one of our maintenance technicians." "A maintenance technician," Alexandra repeated, her voice dripping with disdain. She circled the table slowly, her heels tapping against the floor, her gaze locked on him like a predator testing prey. "Tell me, Mr. Carter," he answered simply. His tone was soft, yet it carried across the room with clarity. "Mr. Carter," she said, her lips curling in mockery. "Tell me, what makes you think you can fix what my team of MIT graduates cannot?" William's expression did not change. He stood steady, the weight of humiliation failing to move him. He met her gaze without flinching. "Because I understand engines, ma'am," he replied, his voice as calm as a quiet river. "Sometimes the most complex problems have the simplest solutions." For a moment, silence swept through the room. Then Alexandra laughed, a cold, brittle sound that echoed against the glass walls. "You understand engines. This isn't a rusty pickup truck from your garage." This is a $3 million prototype crafted from technology you couldn't begin to comprehend." She leaned closer, her voice like ice. "I'll tell you what, Mr. Carter. If you can fix this engine, I'll marry you." The words hung in the air, absurd and cruel, yet she said them with the certainty of someone who believed failure was inevitable. Executives chuckled nervously, eager to align themselves with her contempt. It was a joke, a performance, a public mockery meant to bury him before he even began. But William did not laugh. He did not shrink. Instead, he placed his tool bag gently on the table and rolled up his sleeves. "I'll do it," he said simply. Something shifted then, something invisible but undeniable. The laughter faded into uneasy murmurs. Alexandra raised her brows, unsettled by his composure. She had expected anger, maybe defeat, not this serene acceptance. She did not know yet that William Carter was no ordinary man in coveralls. She did not know that once, before grief and love had reshaped his life, he had been the very kind of engineer her company now worshipped. She did not know that she had just mocked a man who had helped design the foundations of her empire. But William knew. And yet there was no bitterness in his eyes, only a quiet, healing calm, as though the wounds of his past had already been forgiven by the love he still carried within him. He approached the engine with the reverence of a craftsman, pulling a clean rag from his pocket and wiping his hands before touching the machine. It was a small gesture, almost invisible, but to those who noticed, it was profound. Respect for the work, respect for creation, respect for the life humming inside lifeless steel. His fingers moved with purpose, tracing lines of design as though he had known them all his life. He bent close, shining a flashlight into spaces others had overlooked, listening with his heart as much as with his ears. The room waited for failure. Phones were lifted to record the embarrassment. Whispers spread like smoke. "He's going to damage it. This is madness. A liability nightmare." But William ignored them all. He moved in silence, steady as breath, calm as healing hands. Then the door opened, and a little girl slipped quietly into the room. She was 7, with braids that framed her face and ocean blue eyes that sparkled with curiosity. Lily Carter walked past the rows of expensive shoes and polished leather briefcases without hesitation, carrying a water bottle in her tiny hands. She reached her father and tugged on his sleeve. "You forgot this, Daddy," she said softly. William's stern face softened into a smile, one that warmed the sterile room more than any light fixture ever could. He accepted the bottle, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "Thank you, sweetheart. Wait over there for me. I'll be done soon." Lily nodded, her braids swaying, and moved to stand by the window. Her presence was like sunlight breaking through storm clouds, innocent and healing. Some of the executives shifted uncomfortably, reminded that the man they mocked was not just a mechanic, but a father, a soul stitched together by love and responsibility. As William returned to the engine, memories stirred within him, memories of a time when he had been more than this, when he had worked in gleaming laboratories with cutting-edge technology, when his wife Sarah had brought him dinner late at night as he chased innovation. She was gone now, taken by illness after years of his devotion. He had walked away from prestige, from money, from everything except love. He had chosen to care for her, to give her the dignity of his time, and when she passed, he had chosen to live for their daughter. That sacrifice, that love, was what steadied his hands now. 20 minutes passed. William's touch found what diagnostics had missed: a misalignment in the fuel pressure regulator, a calibration loop that strangled ignition. It was subtle, invisible to those who trusted only screens, but not to him. He made the adjustment, precise and unhurried, and then stepped back. "Try it now," he said. The lead engineer hesitated, glancing at Alexandra. She gave a reluctant nod. The key turned. For a heartbeat, silence. And then the engine roared to life. It was a sound that filled the room with astonishment. The pure, perfect hum of power aligned. A song of steel and fire that resonated in every chest. Digital screens lit with optimal readings, efficiency soaring beyond even laboratory results. The engine purred like a living thing, like a heart beating in triumph. The executives froze, phones forgotten, their arrogance stripped bare. Lily clapped her hands, laughter bubbling from her chest. She ran to her father and threw her arms around him. "I knew you could do it, Daddy. I knew it." William bent to hug her, smoothing her hair with gentle fingers. His smile was quiet, not triumphant, not gloating. His eyes did not search for Alexandra or the board, did not demand recognition. His world, his healing center, was his daughter's joy, her faith that had never faltered. And in that moment, something inside Alexandra cracked. The Ice Queen, the woman armored against love and trust, felt a tremor in the walls she had built around her heart. She had mocked him, humiliated him, dismissed him as nothing. Yet here he stood, not triumphant in ego, but whole in a way she had never known. He had power without arrogance, dignity without wealth, love without conditions. The room erupted in murmurs as recognition spread. An older board member stepped forward, eyes wide with memory. "My God, you're William Carter. You're the Carter who designed the original Sterling series." The revelation rippled like thunder. William said nothing, simply nodded, his hand resting gently on Lily's shoulder. His silence was more powerful than any boast, his calm more healing than any apology. And Alexandra, for the first time in years, felt small, not in defeat, but in the sudden awareness that all her power had never filled the emptiness inside her. She had everything the world envied, yet standing before her was a man who had given it all up for love, and in doing so had gained something she could not buy. Her heart, long dormant, whispered a truth she had ignored. Success without connection is hollow. Pride without love is fragile. And sometimes the simplest solutions, like compassion, humility, and faith, are what heal the deepest wounds. In that instant, though she could not yet admit it aloud, Alexandra Sterling's life began to change. The corridors of Sterling Automotive's headquarters echoed faintly with the hushed conversations of executives still reeling from what they had witnessed. The engine's triumphant roar had silenced mockery, humbled arrogance, and left behind the lingering warmth of something no quarterly report could measure. Yet while the board members whispered about reputations and future strategies, William Carter returned quietly to his duties, his tool bag at his side, his daughter's small hand nestled in his. He did not linger to demand thanks. He did not raise his voice to claim victory. For him, dignity was never about recognition. It was about living with truth, with healing grace, with love. Alexandra Sterling remained behind in the empty conference room after everyone else had gone. Her reflection on the glass wall confronted her. A woman perfectly dressed, perfectly poised, yet trembling inside. She had made a cruel promise in arrogance, a jest to disguise her fear of failure. And the man she had dismissed with scorn had not only proven her wrong, but revealed a strength she did not possess. His calmness unsettled her. His quiet love for his daughter shamed her. For the first time in years, she felt the sharp edges of loneliness cut through her armor. That night, in her penthouse high above the city, Alexandra poured herself a glass of wine and stood before the panoramic window. The city lights sprawled endlessly beneath her like constellations, yet she felt no belonging to them. The silence of her luxurious home pressed down heavily, a silence filled not with peace, but with absence. She thought of the little girl's smile, bright and unafraid in a room of power. She thought of William's healing touch upon the machine, his reverence for something as simple as an engine, his quiet devotion. She whispered to the empty room, "Why did you walk away?" The question was not for the city, not for herself, but for him. She could not understand the choice he had made, to give up prestige for love, to sacrifice ambition for the fleeting moments of life with someone he adored. It defied everything she believed, and yet a part of her longed to believe it. 2 days later, Alexandra descended into a part of the building she had never set foot in. The maintenance level smelled of oil and dust, humming with the steady rhythm of machines that kept the headquarters alive. Gone were the marble floors and crystal lighting. Here, everything was functional, purposeful, real. She found William sitting in a modest break room, eating a simple sandwich while reading a technical manual. The sight disarmed her. No grandeur, no pretense, only a man and his quiet life. "May I sit?" she asked, her voice softer than she had intended. William looked up, mildly surprised but not unsettled. He gestured to the chair across from him. "Of course." She sat, feeling strangely overdressed in her tailored suit, her polished heels clicking awkwardly against the linoleum floor. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence was not hostile, but tender, almost healing, as though the world allowed them this pause to breathe. "I owe you an apology," Alexandra began, the words heavy but necessary. "What I said in that room, it was cruel. I was cruel." William studied her with calm eyes, neither condemning nor excusing. "We all have bad days, Miss Sterling," he said gently. "Don't worry about it." The ease with which he forgave unsettled her more than if he had scolded her. His grace was like a mirror reflecting her own hardness. She had built walls of ice around her heart, believing vulnerability was weakness. But here sat a man who had embraced vulnerability, who had chosen love over ambition, and yet carried himself with more dignity than any executive she had ever known. "I don't understand you," she confessed. "You had everything. A career, influence, recognition. Why did you leave it all behind?" William set his sandwich down, folding his hands quietly on the table. His gaze drifted toward the memory only he could see. "My wife got sick," he said softly. "There wasn't a choice to make. She needed me. How could I sit in meetings about profits when each day with her was precious? Some things matter more than careers." His words were not dramatic, not rehearsed. They carried the weight of truth, of sacrifice, of healing love that endures loss. Alexandra felt something stir inside her chest, a crack in the armor she had worn for so long. She had never known love like that, never believed it possible. "Do you regret it?" she asked quietly. A smile touched his lips, tender and sincere. "I gave up a job, but I kept everything that mattered." For the first time, Alexandra felt her breath catch. She had risen through power, defended her throne with steel and coldness, and yet she had nothing to show for it but an empty apartment and nights filled with loneliness. This man, who lived with so little, seemed infinitely richer than she was. In the weeks that followed, Alexandra found excuses to visit the maintenance floor. She would bring an extra cup of coffee, pretending she had ordered it by mistake. She would ask William's opinion on technical matters, though she had an entire engineering department at her disposal. Slowly, she began to learn who he truly was. She learned that he coached Lily's robotics club, spending evenings teaching children how gears and wires could become dreams. She discovered he volunteered at a community center, fixing cars for single mothers who could not afford a mechanic, never asking for payment. She heard from quiet voices in the building how he had repaired the cars of struggling employees, slipping them back their keys with a smile, refusing compensation. Each revelation struck her like gentle waves against a hardened shore, eroding her defenses, softening her edges. This was not charity for attention, not sacrifice for recognition. It was simply who he was, a man who healed not just machines but lives. One evening, Alexandra found him in the parking garage, helping a secretary with a dead battery. She stood at a distance, watching him kneel with his flashlight, his voice calm and steady as he explained each step. There was no condescension, no superiority, only patient guidance. When the car sputtered back to life, the secretary embraced him in gratitude, and William merely smiled, wiping his hands on his rag as if it were nothing extraordinary. "You're always helping people," Alexandra said as she approached. William shrugged lightly. "Everyone needs help sometimes. Today it's them. Tomorrow it might be me." She looked at him beneath the fluorescent lights of the garage, her chest tight with something unfamiliar. Admiration, respect, longing. She thought of the cruel words she had once spoken. "If you fix this engine, I'll marry you." A joke, a weapon, a shield for her pride. Yet he had fixed it. He had done what her best engineers could not, and though she had not meant her words, they now haunted her, echoing with a strange sense of destiny. "I meant what I said that day," she whispered suddenly, the admission trembling on her lips. William's eyes widened slightly, the first true surprise she had seen him show. "Miss Sterling." "Alexandra," she corrected softly. "Call me Alexandra. I know it was cruel, arrogant, everything I have become, but you did it. You fixed it. You fixed more than that, I think. You fixed something in me I didn't realize was broken." Her voice faltered, but she pressed on. "I'm not saying marriage. That would be madness. But maybe we could have dinner. You, me, and Lily. I'd like to know you both better." For a long moment, William said nothing. His silence was not rejection, but consideration, the careful thought of a man who weighed everything against the heart of his daughter. Alexandra's chest tightened. Then, at last, he spoke. "Lily chooses the restaurant," he said quietly, "and she has very strong opinions about dessert." A smile, real and unguarded, spread across Alexandra's face. For the first time in years, it felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. The dinner happened 3 days later, not in a grand restaurant with chandeliers, but in a family diner where children's drawings lined the walls and crayons came with the menus. Lily interrogated Alexandra with the seriousness of a tiny judge, asking her favorite color, whether she knew how to fix a car, and what her favorite dessert was. Alexandra laughed more that evening than she had in months, learning the strange joy of simple moments. She did not need to impress. She only needed to be present. And so, a woman who once lived in the cold heights of power began to learn warmth. Each dinner, each conversation, each smile from William and Lily became like drops of healing water on parched ground. She was no longer the Ice Queen. She was simply Alexandra, a woman discovering what it meant to belong. The rain that evening fell softly over the city, streaking the glass walls of Sterling Automotive's headquarters like quiet tears. Inside, however, warmth was blooming in places Alexandra Sterling never thought possible. It began with laughter, light, genuine, unexpected, rising from a small booth in a family diner 3 nights prior. Alexandra had sat across from William and Lily, her manicured hands wrapped around a mug of hot chocolate rather than her usual glass of imported wine, and for the first time in years she had not felt like a CEO. She had simply felt human. She remembered Lily's wide blue eyes studying her with the sharpness of a child who could not be deceived. "Do you know how to fix a flat tire?" the girl had asked, her tone serious, as if this knowledge were a sacred qualification. Alexandra had laughed, admitting she had no idea. "Daddy says everyone should know," Lily declared, nodding with the authority of innocence. "You should learn." The way William's lips had curved in a soft, healing smile at his daughter's words, the way his grey eyes had warmed when Alexandra promised she would learn, those moments had nestled into Alexandra's heart like seeds, seeds that, in the days since, had begun to sprout, pushing against the stone walls she had built around herself. Now, as she stood in her penthouse, she found herself staring at the simple business card William had given her once, nothing more than his name and a number written in plain ink. No embossed logo, no gilded font, no flair, just simple truth. She ran her thumb across it and wondered at the strange pull she felt, something both terrifying and healing. The following Saturday, Alexandra did something that startled even her. She left her chauffeur and sleek black sedan behind and drove herself in a modest company car to the Carters' neighborhood. The houses there were small, the lawns imperfect, but the air was alive with children's laughter, neighbors calling greetings, the kind of community warmth she had never tasted in her marble tower. She parked outside William's modest 2-bedroom home, where the garage door stood open, revealing shelves of tools, a workbench, and the familiar hum of life lived simply. Lily was crouched on the garage floor, braids bouncing as she tinkered with a small motor. William knelt beside her, guiding her hands with infinite patience. He looked up as Alexandra approached, his expression calm, but touched with surprise. "You came," he said, his voice carrying no judgment, no expectation, just acknowledgement. "I did," she replied, feeling awkward in her casual clothes, jeans, and a sweater she had not worn in years. She shifted her weight, glancing at Lily. "I thought maybe you could teach me how to change a tire." Lily's face lit up with delight. "Really?" William's lips twitched into that quiet smile again. "All right, then. Let's get started." What followed was clumsy, messy, and strangely wonderful. Alexandra, who had once commanded boardrooms with icy precision, found herself kneeling on the concrete, her hands smudged with grease as William showed her each step. Lily watched proudly, offering encouragement with the seriousness of a tiny instructor. Alexandra laughed until her stomach hurt when the jack slipped slightly and she nearly fell backward, and William's steady hand caught her. "Careful," he murmured, his voice soft, his touch firm yet healing. For a moment their eyes met, grey and ice blue, and something unspoken passed between them. By the time the tire was back in place, Alexandra's hands were filthy and her knees ached, but she felt lighter than she had in years. She looked at William, wiping his hands on his rag, and for the first time in her life she envied not his skills, but his peace. The weeks unfolded gently after that, like pages turning in a book neither of them had planned to write. Alexandra found herself attending Lily's school science fair, where the little girl presented a robot built from scraps and dreams. She sat in crowded gymnasiums for plays, cheered at robotics competitions, and spent quiet evenings in William's kitchen helping Lily with homework. Each moment was small, ordinary, yet within them Alexandra discovered a healing she had never known. She learned that love was not always fireworks and grand gestures. It was soup made when someone was sick. It was hands guiding small fingers over wires. It was William's quiet presence at her side during a storm. One evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Alexandra lingered in the Carters' modest living room. The furniture was worn, the decor simple, but there was a warmth here no penthouse could replicate. William sat across from her, his posture relaxed, his expression thoughtful. "You've changed," he said quietly, not as a compliment or an accusation, but as an observation. She looked down at her hands, now free of jewelry. "I feel different," she admitted. "For so long I thought success meant power, control, never showing weakness. But with you, with Lily, I feel like I'm learning how to breathe again, how to be alive." Her voice trembled, but she did not stop. "It's healing, in a way I didn't think I deserved." William's eyes softened, and for the first time she saw the shadow of his grief there, the memory of Sarah, the wife he had loved and lost. Yet alongside it, she saw acceptance, resilience, and the faint spark of something new. "You deserve it," he said simply. The words landed in her heart like a balm. Soothing wounds she had never admitted were there. For a long time they sat in silence, the kind of silence that heals rather than divides. But love, true love, is never without fear. Alexandra feared her world colliding with his, her boardroom life, her reputation, the scrutiny of eyes that never forgave. She feared what it might mean for William and Lily if she allowed herself to fall. And William feared too, not for himself, but for his daughter. He had built Lily's life on stability, on trust, and he could not risk her heart being broken by someone who might decide their world was too small. And so their bond grew slowly, cautiously, like a fragile flower opening under uncertain skies. Alexandra did not rush, William did not push. They met each other in the middle, day by day, act by act, smile by smile. The breakthrough came one afternoon when the school nurse called. Lily had fallen ill during class. Nothing serious, but enough that someone needed to bring her home. William was across town on an urgent repair, unreachable. The school, scanning Lily's emergency contacts, called Alexandra. Without hesitation, she left a board meeting mid-sentence, her phone buzzing with frantic messages as she drove herself to the school. She found Lily curled on the nurse's cot, pale but smiling faintly when she saw Alexandra. "You came," Lily whispered. "Of course I did," Alexandra said, her voice soft, healing as she gathered the girl into her arms. She spent the afternoon with Lily curled against her on the Carter's couch, reading storybooks, making soup, brushing back damp hair with tender fingers she had never used for anyone before. When William returned, worry etched into his face. He found them asleep together. The little girl nestled into Alexandra's side, a book still open in her lap. He stopped in the doorway, his breath catching. For the first time since Sarah's death, he saw not just a partner, but a mother figure for his daughter. His heart ached with fear and hope, love and uncertainty. And when Alexandra's eyes fluttered open, meeting his gaze across the quiet room, he saw his own feelings mirrored in hers. Something had changed. From that day forward, Alexandra was no longer just a guest in their lives. She became part of them, in pancake breakfasts on Saturday mornings, in trips to the farmer's market, in Sunday evenings watching old movies while rain tapped gently at the windows. She learned Lily's favorite foods, her bedtime rituals, the way she loved her eggs scrambled but not too dry. She discovered William's secret fondness for flavored creamers in his coffee, despite his insistence he preferred it black. She laughed, she stumbled, she healed. And slowly, the ice that had once encased her heart melted away, replaced by warmth she had never thought possible. She found herself looking forward to each evening, to each smile, to each touch of William's steady hand. She found herself longing not for power or prestige, but for the simple chaos of family, the messy, beautiful, healing chaos she had once dismissed as weakness. One night, as she left their home, Lily pressed a drawing into her hand. It showed 3 stick figures, one tall with long blonde hair, one broad with grey eyes, and one small with braids. Above them, in a child's scrawl, was written, "My family." Alexandra stood on the porch, tears stinging her eyes as William looked on from the doorway. She clutched the paper to her chest, her heart aching and healing all at once, for in that moment she realized she was no longer standing at the edge of their world. She was already inside it. The morning sun rose slowly over the city, spilling gold across the glass towers, but for Alexandra, the day felt different than any other she had lived. The sharp rhythm of her old life, the endless board meetings, the deadlines, the constant demands for performance, no longer carried the same weight. In their place lingered something softer, gentler, almost healing. The sound of Lily's laughter still echoed in her mind. The warmth of William's steady presence still anchored her heart. She could not have explained it if she tried, but her world had begun to shift. Yet with change came unease. In the boardroom, Alexandra's softened edges did not go unnoticed. Executives whispered when she smiled more often, when she no longer snapped with icy authority, when her tone carried warmth instead of frost. To them, compassion seemed like weakness. They did not understand that what she was learning from William and Lily was not fragility. It was strength of another kind, the kind that healed instead of cut. One afternoon, during a heated discussion about expansion into overseas markets, an older board member made a pointed remark. "You seem distracted these days, Alexandra. Perhaps you're letting personal matters interfere with business?" His tone dripped with suspicion, a veiled threat. For a moment, the old Alexandra almost rose within her, sharp and cold, ready to slice the remark apart with her usual precision. But then she remembered Lily's small hand tugging at hers, William's words about what truly mattered, and she smiled instead, calm, centered, healing. "My personal life is none of your concern," she said evenly. "But if it helps you sleep, know that I am more focused than ever. When you find something worth fighting for beyond profit margins, you learn to make every decision count." The board member faltered, unprepared for this serenity, and the conversation moved on. Alexandra realized then how deeply William's presence had changed her. She no longer sought validation through dominance. Her power had begun to root itself in something far more lasting: truth. Later that evening, she arrived at William's house for dinner. The smell of garlic and tomatoes wafted from the kitchen. Lily's voice rang with excitement about a school project, and William stood at the stove stirring sauce in a pan far too small for his broad frame. Alexandra leaned against the doorway, watching him, her chest tightening with something she dared not yet name. "You look thoughtful," he said, noticing her gaze. "I was just thinking," she admitted, "that this feels more like home than my penthouse ever has." William turned off the stove, wiped his hands, and studied her. "Home isn't walls or furniture, Alexandra. It's people. It's the laughter, the arguments, the ordinary moments. It's what heals you when the world outside feels cold." Her throat tightened. She wanted to tell him that she longed to belong to this home, to them, to him. But fear held her tongue. Days passed, and with each one their bond deepened. They went together to Lily's robotics club, where Alexandra found herself clapping with genuine pride as the little team of children presented their awkward machines. On weekends they visited the farmer's market, where William taught her how to choose ripe fruit, and Lily dragged her from stall to stall with infectious energy. At night they watched old movies together, Lily falling asleep between them on the couch, her head resting against Alexandra's shoulder. For Alexandra, every one of these moments was healing, stitching back pieces of a heart she hadn't even realized was broken. She laughed freely, not as a weapon, but as a gift. She allowed herself to be seen, flaws and all, and found that William never judged her for them. But not all was simple. Rumors began to circulate in the upper floors of Sterling Automotive. Whispers about the CEO spending time with a maintenance worker, about dinners at modest diners, about a little girl who now appeared in her life. Alexandra faced them with dignity, but William worried. He knew how cruel the world of wealth and power could be, and his greatest fear was that Lily might be caught in its crossfire. One evening, after tucking Lily into bed, William lingered in the living room with Alexandra. The lamp cast a soft glow, the air thick with unspoken words. Finally, he broke the silence. "Alexandra, I need to ask, where is this going?" She froze, her heart hammering. "I have to think about Lily," he continued, his voice calm but edged with protectiveness. "She's already grown attached to you. If this is just temporary, if it's something that will fade when the board disapproves or when the pressure becomes too much, then I need to know now. Because I can't let her heart break." His words were not harsh, but they struck deep. Alexandra's chest ached. She thought of her life of control, of masks, of carefully built walls. And then she thought of Lily's drawing, the 3 stick figures, the words, "My family," scrawled above them. Tears pricked her eyes. "I don't want temporary," she whispered. "For the first time in my life, I want something real. I want you, both of you. I just don't know how to balance it with the world I've built." William reached across the table, his hand steady, warm, healing. "Then we figure it out together." The simple promise filled the room like light. The months that followed tested them. Alexandra faced board members who doubted her choices, tabloids that speculated about her private life, and her own inner fears of vulnerability. But each challenge was met with William's quiet strength, his unwavering belief that love was worth more than reputation. He never raised his voice, never demanded. Instead, he stood beside her, steady as an anchor, healing as rain after drought. The turning point came at Lily's school play. She stood on stage, dressed as a robot in a quirky adaptation of Cinderella, her lines faltering halfway through. The audience chuckled, but William leaned forward, whispering the words loud enough for her to hear. Alexandra watched as Lily's face lit with confidence, and she carried on, her voice clear and strong. Without thinking, Alexandra reached for William's hand. He did not pull away. Their fingers intertwined naturally, as though they had always belonged that way. And in that small, ordinary moment, surrounded by proud parents, sticky floors, and the scent of popcorn, Alexandra felt something profound. She felt healed. After the play, as they walked together with Lily bouncing between them, a photographer from the school paper asked for a picture. Before Alexandra could correct the assumption, Lily pulled them both close and shouted, "Say family!" The flash captured their faces, smiling, unguarded, happy. Later, when Alexandra looked at the photo, she did not see a CEO, a mechanic, and a child. She saw a family, a real one. That night, as she stood on William's porch before leaving, she hesitated. The air was cool, the stars scattered across the sky. William stood close, his presence steady, his eyes searching hers. "Thank you," she whispered, though she wasn't sure for what. Perhaps for Lily, for the healing, for the second chance at life. William tilted his head, studying her. "For what?" "For reminding me what matters," she said softly. Her heart raced, her lips trembled. And then, before fear could silence her, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle, hesitant, like a question asked in the quiet of night. But within it flowed every healing moment they had shared, every laugh, every truth, every silent promise. When they parted, Alexandra felt tears on her cheeks, though she had not realized she was crying. William brushed them away with his thumb, his touch tender. "You don't have to be strong all the time," he said. "Sometimes, letting yourself be held is the strongest thing you can do." And in his arms, beneath the stars, Alexandra allowed herself, for the first time in her adult life, to be held, to be healed. The city that once seemed so cold now shimmered differently in Alexandra's eyes. She no longer saw only glass towers and numbers on screens. She began to notice the laughter of children in the park, the quiet rhythm of families at the farmer's market, the way William's steady voice brought calm to chaos, the way Lily's curious questions could make even the hardest day feel lighter. Slowly, she realized she had been walking not toward power, but toward healing. and for the first time, she was not afraid to admit it. Months passed, and whispers around Sterling Automotive grew louder. Executives could not ignore the change in their CEO. She still commanded meetings, still negotiated deals with brilliance, but there was something new in her presence, an openness, a warmth that softened her once icy edges. It unsettled some, inspired others, but Alexandra no longer cared. Her heart had found a home, and no amount of gossip could shake it. The board meeting that changed everything began like any other. Charts on screens, discussions about quarterly projections, debates about expansion. But when Alexandra rose to speak, the room stilled. She was radiant in her confidence, yet her voice carried not only authority, but gentleness, the healing kind that reaches beyond walls. "I want to announce a change," she began, her gaze sweeping the room. "Not only in this company, but in myself. This business was built on family values by my father, and I intend to honor that legacy, not just in profits, but in the way we live, the way we lead." Murmurs rippled through the boardroom, uncertain, curious. Alexandra continued. "William Carter will be returning to Sterling Automotive as our Chief Innovation Officer. Many of you know him only as a technician, but the truth is he was once one of our brightest engineers, the man whose designs built the foundation of our engines today. He left not because of failure, but because of love. And in that choice, he taught me what true success means." Shock washed across the faces around the table. Some whispered in disbelief, others in recognition. But Alexandra's eyes sought only one corner of the room, where William stood quietly, Lily at his side, her small hand clutching his. "And there's something else I want to share," Alexandra said, her voice steady, though her heart pounded. "For too long, I lived believing that power meant control, that love was weakness. But I was wrong. Real strength is found in vulnerability, in healing, in the courage to love even when it's frightening. William and I, we are together. And Lily has become the heart of everything I do. This is my family, and I am proud to say it before all of you." The room erupted. Not in laughter as it once had, but in astonishment, in applause, in the dawning recognition that this was not weakness, but transformation. Alexandra walked from the podium, her heels clicking against the floor, but her steps were lighter than they had ever been. She reached William and Lily, took their hands, and together they faced the world. What followed became legend within the company. The story of the CEO who once mocked a single father and then fell in love with him spread like wildfire. Business magazines and lifestyle blogs alike published photos of them. William in his simple clothes, Alexandra in her elegant suits, and Lily between them, grinning as though she knew the secret of the universe. But the most cherished photograph was not staged for press. It was the candid one from Lily's school play, where they sat hand in hand, laughter spilling freely. That was the picture Alexandra kept on her desk, a reminder that healing begins not in boardrooms, but in love. The wedding was small, intimate, held not in a grand ballroom, but in the community centre where William volunteered. Lily insisted on being both flower girl and best person, a title she invented with pride. Alexandra wore a simple gown, chosen with Lily's help, and William wore the same suit he had once worn to Sarah's funeral, now repurposed for new beginnings. The vows were not rehearsed, not poetic, but real. Alexandra spoke of second chances, of learning to see past the armor of pride, of finding healing in the quiet dignity of a man who had taught her what love truly meant. William's words were brief but steady. "I gave up a life once, but now I've found a better one, with you." Years passed, and the family grew. A baby boy joined them, his wide eyes filled with the calm of his father and the determination of his mother. The Carter home, modest yet filled with laughter, became a sanctuary of healing, a place where love was louder than any storm. Sterling Automotive thrived, not only in innovation, but in culture, as Alexandra and William reshaped it into a company that valued people as much as profit. Maintenance staff were no longer invisible. Every worker was recognized, every voice mattered. On quiet evenings, when the children were asleep, Alexandra would sit beside William on the porch, watching the stars. Sometimes she thought back to the day in the conference room, to the cruel challenge she had hurled like a weapon. "Fix this engine, and I'll marry you." She would laugh softly at the memory, shaking her head. "I never meant it," she would whisper. William would smile, his hand finding hers. "And yet, here we are." She would lean into him then, resting her head against his shoulder, her heart whole, her soul healed. For in truth, he had fixed more than an engine that day. He had fixed the broken pieces of her heart. And together, with Lily's laughter and Samuel's tiny steps filling their days, they had built something greater than any empire: love. And so their story became more than just romance. It became a reminder, whispered through the halls of Sterling Automotive, shared quietly among employees and friends, that love can heal the harshest wounds, that dignity can rise from humility, that true success is not measured by wealth, but by the warmth of the people who stand beside you. And if you are listening to this story now, let it remind you too that healing is possible, that love can arrive when you least expect it, and that sometimes the cruelest moments in life can become the very beginning of something beautiful. If this story touched your heart, I invite you to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters here, and together we can keep telling stories that bring warmth, healing, and love into the world.